Mr. Gutierrez, you can put the podium down if you would like. On the top there, there's a up and down. There's a button. No, right here.
Oh, I figured it must be. This is simple. Thank you. A taller Luis Gutierrez. Thank you. Can we run just to refresh everybody's memory? We're going to show you some stills and video. There's other video that we have decided not to release. The video was all taken by members openly. This is not secret, not undercover video. They asked us for our cameras. We told them our cameras are our personal property. You invited us here. We're going to walk in with our cameras, and if we feel that there is an opportunity, an appropriate opportunity to take some video, we're going to take it. This is America. And we said, yes, we can, and we took our cameras in. We didn't go there to work for anybody but the people of the United States. Can you run them?
The video.
Not that good. Thank you. So that we visited two of the prison camps outside of San Antonio on Monday and yesterday. I'm going to let my colleagues address each and every one of you. It was very, very heartbreaking and very, very painful. The video really doesn't reflect the tears, the anguish of the moms and the dads. I interviewed a little girl. She needed to see a dentist bad. I interviewed a mom that's been in jail for over a year. No, I'm sorry. Let me correct that. She's 15 days away from her 1-year anniversary at the detention center. 15 days away. She has a $20,000 bond. And so I want to start out just by making it clear. They're not in these prison camps because they've done anything wrong, because they've been accused of anything. As a matter of fact, most of them are spending nearly a year there, and they've already been before a judge, and the judge has said, you've established your credible fear. And now they're waiting for their court process to go through. But they will not be released. I wish all of you had been there to meet the children. Children get sick. I'm a dad. I have 2 girls. One's 35, one's 27. Part of having children is you're going to take them to the doctor a lot. They're going to get sick all of the time. That's what children do. Now imagine over 1,000 children in a facility. And imagine just inadequate health care. The food is not the food that they eat. And the food is food that is there, and the children are not eating it. So, look, even if you... I came to the conclusion that even if they gave them good food, the kids are in jail. They're not going to eat it. They are sad and they're depressed and they're worried, and they begged us to get them out of there and let them reunite with family members as they pursue their day in court. It became clear to me that that must be our goal. Our goal isn't to fix the place. We shouldn't have over 1,000 children detained in a prison camp. Lastly, I thought time and time again as I looked at the sheet, the price sheet, if you want some water, it's $1.29. I don't know where they're going to get $1.29 since they don't have any money. If you want to get some juice, if you want to get something, you have to buy it. Look, these prison camps, these detention centers, are for profit. Now I just want you to think what that means. That means that in our society, the bottom line is, how much money are you going to profit? You're going to get a contract. How much of that money are you going to be able to line your pockets with? And I assure you that in doing so, they are making decisions about what kind of food, what kind of medical attention, what kind of teachers they're going to have, what kind of facility. They're going to make this cost effective. That isn't the way we should be treating children and moms that come fleeing. Despots and tyrannical regimes that are run by drug cartels. And so it was a very, very sad day yesterday. I'm going to introduce my colleagues and as in the same order in which they arrived. And so the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, our friend Zoe Lofton.
Thank you, Luis. Yes, on Monday and Tuesday, our group went to visit two camps in Texas, the Carnes Camp and Dilley. And I will say it had been my belief prior to these visits that it would be inappropriate to house mothers and children in a custody setting in jail. And everything that we saw not only reaffirmed that belief, but infused us with a sense of urgency to change this. You know, we went to the Carnes facility first, and it's a jail. I mean, I was in local government for 14 years, and we ran jails. And it was more lockdown than some of the jails we had for juveniles. You can't fix that. The children, a majority of the inmates are children, little kids. And when we walked out into the yard between, I don't want to call them cells or rooms, 100 women ran up to me holding their little toddlers, weeping, saying, please get us out of here. The children, we were told, by the dean of the School of Social Work at the University of Texas, are incurring terrible psychological damage from their incarceration. He explained, having examined some of these children, that they, because of their incarceration, that they are regressing. Some 4, 5, 6-year-old kids are trying to nurse their mothers. 8, 9, 10-year-old kids are now back in diapers. And yesterday at Dilley, we walked in, invited into one of the cells by a mother, and there was an 8-year-old child in diapers, confirming what the dean had told us. You know, we have a lot of rhetoric in this country. We use words like illegal aliens. Well, these are women and children who are fleeing, for the most part, fleeing incredible violence and complying with the immigration law, which says you can come to America, whether you're from Africa, any part of the world, and you're seeking safe haven, and apply for asylum. And that's what these women are doing. They are applying for asylum. And what do we do at enormous expense to the taxpayer? Put them in jail for extended periods of time. Now, there's no way to fix jail for these children. When we went to Dilley, it's over 2,000 people in this jail. A majority of them are children who have done nothing. I think we can all agree. Those children have done absolutely nothing wrong. Our behavior towards these children, our taxpayer-funded incarceration policy, does not comport with American values. It does not comport with international law. Our interest is that these women appear at their hearings. And we know that if they are followed by some of our religious groups that want to manage their cases and give us assurance that they will show up at their hearings, they will show up at their hearings. We don't need to spend $130,000 per person to lock them in a jail so that they will appear in court. That is a waste of money, and it is really a travesty. So we're meeting with Secretary Johnson this afternoon. We're aware that a statement was released that appears to be far from adequate in terms of a response. We intend to continue this until we can hold our heads high as Americans and make sure that we're no longer putting in jail 1,000 little kids in Texas.
Lucille Robel-Allard, please.
Thank you. I'd like to start by, first of all, responding to a description of that ICE released yesterday about these facilities. And I want to do that by going back to when I was in the state legislature. And I toured a place that, if I were to describe it, it had a gym, it had a library, it had a school, classrooms where people could get their GEDs, even go to college. It had private rooms. You know, it sounded really, really nice if you would just go by the description. What I'm describing is a California state prison. Yesterday, ICE released a description of the facilities, very similar to what I just described. And if you were just to go by that description, you'd say, you know, well, what's the problem? There's recreation, there's all these kinds of things. The problem is, as my colleagues have said, they are prisons. And when you go there, yeah, there's a playground, but you know what? We didn't see any children playing on that playground. They were holding on to their mothers. And the stories that you heard from these mothers as to why they came, the stories of rape, of being threatened by gangs, not only threatening their own lives, but threatening their children, threatening their parents, that they had absolutely no alternative. But one of the things that was the saddest for me was the trauma they described once they got here, the treatment that they are getting in these facilities. One mother told me they treat us like we're stupid. They yell at us and they demean us in front of our children who are already traumatized. And they talked about the fact that anytime their child was ill, they were basically told, oh, well, just go drink some water. And one mother came to, when we were out in the courtyard and we were talking with them, I asked them what was one of their biggest complaints, and one of the mothers said, I can't get help for my daughter. And she showed me what she was talking about, and she lifted it was probably about a 2-3-year-old little girl. And she lifted her dress, and her entire back was just covered in a terrible, terrible rash. And she said, they just tell me that it's okay, just drink some water. Another mother, unfortunately, who we met with, and then Zoe got word yesterday, tried to commit suicide, talked about the fact that her daughter had an infection. And again, they kept telling her, well, just tell your daughter to drink water. It'll go away. This is happening here in this country because the facility that they are in is a private facility for profit, and they could care less about the human aspect of those who are there. And that has to stop. We have to get those children out of these facilities. And I just want to end with this. During one of our private meetings, there was an 8-year-old girl who was just sitting there, and she was drawing as the women were talking about their plight and how long they had been there, what they were experiencing. And as I was getting ready to leave, she hands me this. It was something that she had been drawing. And her name is Helen. And over here, there are eyes with tears. And it says in Spanish, Quiero ser libre. I want to be free.
Thank you, Lucille. Joaquin, Congressman Castro's asked me to recognize our whip, who we're so thankful to him. I know I speak for all of us. So thankful to you for accompanying us. Please, come on, finish.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I was late. We're in caucus discussing the business of the week. But I was very privileged to join all of my colleagues on a visit to Carnes. I did not get to go to Delhi. I had to be back in town yesterday. But we went to Texas to see firsthand the condition of the centers and the families, the women and children who were there, and to speak to them. I know it's been said, and it's my understanding that the Secretary has announced that he's taking action, which is a move in the right direction. We will have an opportunity later today to speak to the Secretary to discuss further actions. But these facilities need to be closed, not expanded. The individuals being detained with their children in these centers have committed no crime. You corrected me yesterday. You were correct to correct me, because they've committed no crime. They've complied with U.S. law. They've came and said, we need refuge. We need safety. We need protection from not only domestic violence, but violence from gangs and from the governments themselves of the countries from which they've come. That, of course, is what America is, a country of refuge. That's why people came to America in the 15th century and beyond. The individuals being detained with their children in these centers, as I say, have committed no crime. They simply seek safety and asylum. I continue to be deeply concerned that children in these facilities lack basic health and educational resources. Lucille, you spoke very movingly. I was not with you at that facility about the children. We saw medical facilities available. We did not see them being used. That does not mean they're not used, but we didn't see it. Detaining children puts them at risk of medical and developmental problems in the short term and later in life. We met with an expert at the University of Texas on child psychology and saying the adverse effects such detention had. On Monday, I met with a young boy named Jefferson. Today is his 4th birthday. He has spent 25% of his life in detention. Not because his mother's committed a crime or he's committed a crime, but because that is the way America's system is working. It's my understanding the Secretary is going to change that system. We'll find out further later today. We have a responsibility as a nation to approach this issue with compassion and treat it for what it is, a humanitarian issue. We ought to treat every child the way we would treat our own children, our own grandchildren, and in my case, my own great-grandchildren. At the same time, we need to be working with the international community and aid groups to address the underlying problems of gang violence and extreme poverty that led these migrants, i.e. compelled these migrants to flee for the safety of their children and for the safety of themselves. I also want to note that it's costing taxpayers $162 per day per detainee at Carnes facility to jail these asylum seekers and their children. I hope that Secretary Johnson's statement this morning and later today will be a very strong step in the right direction. But it is a step. Let me reiterate that I believe that the best solution, the right one, is to close these centers. At the same time, I hope both parties can work together in the House to advance comprehensive immigration reform. The system is broken. This is one part of a broken system. The rational response is to fix that system. And I look forward to working with my colleagues toward that end, and I thank them for giving me this opportunity to not only join them, but to speak out with them on this critically important issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steny, and thank you, Joaquin. We were his guests in San Antonio, and I can't think of a better host. And I want, on behalf of the complete delegation, to thank you. When we organized the meeting, we couldn't have expected anything better. It was so excellent. Thank you for being with us in Congress, and please, Joaquin.
Thank you. Thank you, Luis. We visited with many of you last week and made the point that we believe that the detention camps should be closed. Our visits to both Carnes and Dilley affirmed our belief that these detention camps should be closed. We had a chance to visit with many women and children who, as you can see from both the photographs and the video, are in very desperate straits. These are people who came here fleeing violence and persecution, fleeing gangs and drug lords. And throughout this process, I have asked the administration and asked, as Americans, that we update our notion of what it means to be someone who seeks asylum in this country and someone we think of as a refugee. Our definition in our minds is still left over from the 1950s and 60s when people were fleeing communism in Vietnam, in Cuba, and other places around the world. And the reason they were fleeing those places is because they lived in societies where violent political figures persecuted them, tortured them, abused them, and forced them away from their homeland. Those are the same conditions that these women and children are fleeing from their home countries. Except the perpetrators are not political figures mostly. They are gangs and drug lords who are often uncontrolled in the countries from which these people come. And so as Americans, we need to make sure that we treat them in a way that is consistent with American values, with respect, with compassion, and with the utmost humanity. And so I agree with Minority Whip Hoyer that the statement this morning by Secretary Johnson is a strong step in the right direction for an administration that I would add has been very conscientious on many major American issues, whether it's been ending Don't Ask, Don't Tell, pushing for marriage equality, whether it's been making sure that every American has the ability to afford health care. We would ask the administration to also be conscientious in this realm. And finally, close these detention camps. And I'll add one last thing. You know, I think it was Lucille that mentioned that there was a woman that we met with in Carnes, that the group met with in Carnes on Monday, who attempted suicide the next day. These people are very desperate. So I would ask the administration and Secretary Johnson immediately to let these people know of the changes in policy, to immediately give them hope, because people's lives literally on the line.
Thank you, Joaquin. She's our colleague on the Judiciary Committee, and from Texas, shares the state with Joaquin, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee.
Thank you very much. I have experienced a very tough week. Spent the weekend in a number of memorials dealing with Mother Emanuel and those who lost their life. But I always believe where there is an opportunity to make America better, it is important for members of Congress to be directly engaged. And what I saw yesterday, the 2,000 incarcerated individuals, is not America, or it is not American. And these centers were born out of fear and hatred, not by the administration. Because I want to join my colleagues in thanking the President and the Secretary of Homeland Security for hearing our voices and beginning to look in a positive way. But when the surge came, I was actively engaged through hearings, through my committee, through going to the border, to seeing incarcerated babies down at the border in little cells, holding them and seeing their parents. And the news went around the nation that we were under attack and we needed to do something. And a dilly was born. The administration felt that it had to do something. And that is to lease land, put up portable buildings, and hold 2,000 persons in a way that is not America or American. During that time last year, the United Nations said this was a humanitarian crisis, and it should have been handled in that manner. And there were faith communities in Congressman Castro's district, San Antonio, outpouring of faith communities and nonprofits who said we want to take these individuals in my own city of Houston and around the nation. But it did not happen. So yesterday, when we sat in a room, we saw a 13-year-old girl, but a beautiful little girl, in the time when she should be enjoying things that teenagers, preteens enjoy. And all she did was cry and ask to be free. Or the child who, right in front of us, had blood coming out of their nose. They hadn't just been hit. They had an ongoing illness that had not been attended to. I do not attribute maliciousness, and as I walked through, I indicated to the ICE officers that they were doing their job, they were in the service of their nation. But you have a profit element that undermines what we're doing. A private prison, the private prison workers, you don't know who is saying what to who is treating whom disrespectfully, who's not understanding that the little child needed to go to the doctor. One woman's husband was kidnapped. Her family is being extorted. She doesn't know if the husband has ever come back. And she's been here 2 months, going on 3 months. That is not a humanitarian way to deal with people who have passed their credible fear hearing, those that were in that room, or either had not even had it. There is no criminal offense. So my heart was broken, and I, again, in a very resounding way, believe, particularly in my state, that we are hosting these 2 facilities, that they should be closed and closed now. Let me be very clear. We're not coddling the idea of an illegal immigration posture. We are saying there should be comprehensive immigration reform. These individuals have no opposition to going through the legal system. They welcome it. They stand for it. They run toward it. And everyone we asked in our room where we were meeting, they said, if you were out, would you come to court? Yes. And I know when mothers have children, they want to do everything they can to protect those children. To the administration, you have the compassion, you have the intellect, and you know what is right and wrong. This is not working. The teleconferencing court session as a lawyer is the most difficult process. The women do not understand what is going on. It is all said in English. There lies a very difficult posture. And I want to join my colleague, Congressman Castro. He is absolutely right. The lawyers have said to us that the bar on asylum has gone through the roof, and that it takes them months to prepare for one case. One case. That is not America or American. And I don't believe there is any way other than a reformation of the system using these nonprofits, the faith community, housing these individuals in humane circumstances, providing them the pathway through an asylum hearing. Remember, I did not say asylum. I said asylum hearing. for a determination to be made and to rid ourselves of the profit incentive of private prisons making money, $350 a day in Dilley, I believe, as the reason why we have to incarcerate women and children who scream simply freedom. I think we can do better because it is not America and it's not American.
Next, we're going to have nobody's spoken more clearly about the private for-profit prison system or advocated for its abolition than Councilman Raul Grijalva. Please, sir.
Thank you. Let me very briefly thank all my colleagues, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with them. Mr. Castro set up excellent meetings with people in the area in San Antonio, and they were very good, and we were very grateful for his generosity of time and for putting the thing together and making sure we had a good agenda. Yesterday, I left the latter part of the tour at Dilley, because as you saw in the video, all those moms were out there with their babies and their kids demonstrating and reaching out to us. Took a great deal of courage, and as I was going, so when we ran into him, and I just became really angry about the situation, very sad about it, and just as we were getting done, and Luis was talking to the mom, a little guy came up and hugged me on the leg and said, "Are you here to get us out of this jail? Los vas a llevar, los vas a sacar de la cárcel." And I went, oh my God. And I don't know, 4 or 5. So to me, I understand that, DHS is making some initiatives to try to soften the situation in these 2 detention centers and others. But quite frankly, I don't care how much lipstick you put on it. The fact of the matter is that it is a prison for women and children. And it is, I don't care how gilded the cage might be, it's still a cage and it's still a prison for women and children. And the bottom line, I think, is DHS has to approach this as people seeking asylum and refugee status in this country as the law calls for, in a way in which their cases are managed, access to legal support, supported services, and protection of their credible stories regarding the need for asylum and refugees, separate from immigration reform. This is a law that needs to be protected. I mentioned the bottom line is that we're dealing with a for-profit prison system contracted by DHS with minimal oversight, very little accountability, and as much as ICE tries to provide oversight, I think it's an impossibility. And so, let's eliminate the monetary gain out of this and deal with it in a much more rational way than we're doing now, turning over this women and children to a for-profit or prison. That's I told you about the little guy that hugged me. I also want to give you a little story. Norma from my staff asked one of the moms who were there with a little baby, 4 years old, knowing what you know, knowing what you've been through to get here. You've been here almost a year in this prison with your little girl. Knowing all that, would you do it again? And she said, absolutely. She goes, when I was as a young woman, I was sexually assaulted and raped in my country. There is with impunity, no rule of law, no civil society. Breaks down, and she has a 4-year-old little girl. And she was not going to allow that to happen to her. And that's why she came to seek refuge and asylum here in this country, because it is our country and our laws are respected. I mentioned that story because I think that those were profound points. El secretario los va a dar de unas noticias hoy que van a cambiar, hacerlo más, ponerle otra carita a la cuestión tan central, que es una prisión para mujeres y sus hijos y niños. Y al fin del día se tiene que cerrar y tiene que haber una estrategia muy diferente a tratar con estos niños y sus mamás. Esos cambios no quitan los puntos centrales, que se tienen que cerrar como estas prisiones y que esas madres y sus hijos tengan la oportunidad de hacer su petición en un modo legal y con las consecuencias que van a tener asistencia. I want to thank everybody. This, for me, was a very important one. It's a huge issue. The Secretary needs to understand that this is not something you can window dress. This fundamentally has to stop the practice that we're doing for women and children in this country and putting them in a prison. Thank you.
Judiciary Committee member and our friend, Congresswoman Judy Chu.
When I first saw the Dilley Detention Center, I was shocked at how isolated and barren it was. The first thing I thought was that these looked so much like the Japanese-American internment camps of World War II. I saw the sterile barracks, the muddy dirt pathways, the mass institutionalized cafeteria, and the guards everywhere. And I also remembered how the Japanese-American internment camps were pitched to the American public as though the federal government was doing this for the safety of Japanese Americans. And in a like manner, I see that the Dilley Detention Center is called a name that makes it sound like a spa. The South Texas Residential Family Center. Well, if this is such a wonderful family residential center, then why are its residents trying to commit suicide and hundreds of women and children demonstrating for their freedom? Just like we have to call the Japanese American internment camps for what they were, a prison for people who were not criminals, we have to call the Carnes and Dilley Detention Center for what they really are, prisons for people who are not criminals. And I have to ask, why is the U.S. government spending $337 a day at Dilley per person and $161 a day per person at Carnes to lock up women and children when there are less expensive alternatives available, such as alternative detention that will be 17 cents to $17 a day per person? It's outrageous. Because of this trip, I was able to visit both Carnes and Dilley. I was able to talk to the women and children who have been locked up and through their tears hear their stories. I heard from the woman from Honduras whose son and daughter were forced into the drug cartels. She was raped, this mother, as well as her 15-year-old daughter. She and her daughter escaped, but ended up in these detention facilities for months. And now, because it seems like there's no way out with a $10,000 bond imposed on them, her daughter had to be taken into the medical unit because she wanted to commit suicide. And then I heard from the two sisters from Mexico and their children. They came because one of the sisters' husbands was kidnapped for ransom by the drug cartels, and the drug cartels demanded a ransom. They fled for the safety because they knew that their children would be threatened next. And they came to the U.S. for asylum. The asylum officers did declare them to have credible fear, but they are being charged different bonds. One is being charged $8,000, the other one $4,000. What sense does that make? Why is it that these two sisters, coming with the same circumstances, are being charged different amounts for their bonds? It's a totally irrational process. But it might as well be $1 million because it is unattainable. And then, at Dilley, I was astounded when we stepped out to the main yard to see hundreds of desperate women and children demonstrating and chanting for their freedom. They had used pillowcases and bed sheets to make picket signs because they had nothing else to draw on. In fact, I'll never forget one 5-year-old boy who had one such pillowcase in front of him saying, "I am not a criminal, please give me my freedom." And as we got closer, they surrounded us with tears streaming down their faces as they pleaded for help. I've been in a lot of demonstrations in my lifetime, but I've never seen anything like this, especially the courage of women and children to demonstrate in front of the guards who have clearly shown that they will commit retribution against them. And I must say, I concluded, who are we as a country to lock up 4- and 5-year-olds and their mothers who've never had a criminal history. We are outraged when we hear that Congressmember Mike Hondo was locked up when he was a 1-year-old toddler in the Japanese internment camps. Why aren't we outraged that these people are being locked up? America is better than this, and we have to end these family detention centers.
Thank you so much, Judy. Antes de proceder con preguntas, before we continue with questions, quisiera decirle que cuando primero propuse esta visita, sabía que era importante, pero nunca me imaginé que 8 líderes del Congreso iban a asumir la responsabilidad y traer sus voces aquí, como yo creo que es sin precedente para nosotros, en la comunidad inmigrante, tener 8 congresistas de la magnitud, de la madurez, de la seriedad de aquellos. Me honran con la visita que pudimos hacer juntos. Y quisiera decirle que, miren, es bien importante porque todavía aún se piensa que han sido detenidos porque han cometido una irregularidad, han cometido una fechoría. Ninguna de las mujeres o los niños son criminales. No han cometido ninguna irregularidad, no han cometido ninguna violación de ley. De hecho, ellos son los que han sido violados. Y quiero ser bien claro, el video nunca nos lo demuestra. Pero esas madres nos agarraban llorando, sus niños pidiendo que alguien les ayudara. Un muchacho de 14 años, Jonathan, nunca me voy a olvidar de él, más grande que yo, 14 años, de Honduras. La inmensa mayoría de Honduras. Me agarró y me dijo, que Dios te bendiga, gracias que viniste aquí. No deje que la Mara me mate. ¿Sabe lo que yo quería hacer? Yo quería llevármelo a casa. Pero yo no creo que mi reacción es extraordinaria. Yo creo que si el público americano llega a poder asistir y ver esos niños, se los llevan a su casa también. Porque ese no es América que yo conozco. América que yo conozco son americanos, nosotros, que cuando vemos abuso, vemos necesidad, llenamos esa necesidad con amor, con cariño, no con encarcelamiento. Le agradezco infinitamente al secretario Johnson. Nosotros sabemos que están haciendo cambio, pero queremos hacer absolutamente claro, esto no se puede arreglar, esto hay que eliminarlo. Hay que buscar una manera más decente, más humana de tratar a aquellos que lleguen aquí huyendo peligro, violencia y muerte. Y yo creo que mis colegas han hecho un trabajo increíble. I want to thank you all because I think no one person, Sheila, could just capture everything that happened. I think we're all doing it. So, Judy, Joaquin, we're all doing it, and we're all being impacted. And now we're going to be wonderful ambassadors for those children among our colleagues. It's changed I've been, a lot of you think that, where we go when we take these trips. This has been a trip that's been completely transformative for me. I've traveled all over this country for the last 15 years fighting for immigrants. Nothing has impacted me the way those detention centers have impacted me. And I have seen the plight of immigrants, the abuse of immigrants, but never have I seen it quite in that manner. Remember, everybody, there are over 1,000 children in that facility. We don't know exactly. There are 2,000 people. Over 1,000 of them are children, little babies. And I hope when you see the videos, you could watch the babies, because that's what I think we have to focus our attention on. Are there any questions?
Congresista, both for Congresswoman Loughran and you, and if we can get a comment in Spanish at the end, great too. You call it inadequate. Congressman Castro is also calling it a step in the right direction. But what is inadequate on the changes that they announced today? They're announcing several things, including the possible discontinuation of long-term detention once certain levels, I guess, are met, requirements on asylum procedures or requests, but what is inadequate exactly of what was proposed or suggested today?
Well, Zoe is going to answer in English.
And then Luis in Spanish.
Fabulous.
First, these are locked facilities. And, to say, I saw the ICE statement saying, how great they are. First, you can't get out. You're in lockup. Number two, what are some of the other indices of the lockup? You have to line up and be counted like you're an inmate, which you are. You're fed as a group on a schedule. You have to go in with lights out at 10. There's a wake-up knock on the door at 5 a.m. You have to get out. Your movement is controlled. There are guards. The inmates, the women, are afraid of the guards. They're afraid of retaliation, and we heard stories of retaliation from people who had spoken up. So to premise that people who are seeking asylum, people who are refugees are going to remain in these jails cannot be the answer. As our whip, Standing Hoyer, said, these facilities have to close. And they have to be replaced with a more affordable system of case management that ensures that the women who are seeking asylum following our laws show up in court and have the proceedings proceed in an orderly manner. And that is what we would find acceptable. I'll say further this. In May, there were supposed improvements. Where there would be a 90-day review. We met women who'd been there 5 and 6 months who never heard of the 90-day review. So even what's been reported has not occurred. Now, I think Secretary Johnson is a decent person and a competent administrator, but what he has said has clearly not occurred even yet from May.
Mire, no se puede encarcelar niños, mucho menos encarcelar niños por un año. Eso es inaceptable. Los que llevan allí ya un año, los que llevan 6 meses, 7 meses, y ya, porque es un poquito complicado, pero no es tan complicado. Ya estas mujeres y los niños han ido ante las cortes de los Estados Unidos. Han ido ante un juez de inmigración y el juez le ha dicho, yo creo que tú tienes un caso probable, ¿verdad? Y yo te voy a dar una audiencia completa. El problema es que antes de darle la audiencia completa, antes de celebrar ese juicio para ver si lo van a dar estatus de refugiado aquí, se puede esperar años. No deben esperar esos años encarcelados. Si el gobierno encuentra que ellos tienen, si un juez ha determinado que ellos tienen caso probable, entonces vamos a proceder. Y quiero decir esto también. Es un poquito complicado, porque yo vi y hablé con 6 mujeres, y las 6 mujeres con las cuales yo hablé, uno iba a Nebraska, la otra iba a Carolina del Sur, la otra a Florida, a todas partes. Los latinos estamos donde quiera. No estamos donde quiera, estoy convencido de eso. Y yo le pregunté a las 6, ¿cuánto tiempo? Una semana. Obviamente hay 2 grupos para mí. Hay aquellos que están recién llegados, que están procesando los documentos bastante rápido, pero hay aquellos que se han quedado casi un año. Y cuando hablé con el secretario ayer, y no voy a hablar mucho de lo que le dije al secretario, pero le puedo decir esto. Yo le dije, señor secretario, coge la lista de aquellos que llevan un año ahí y procede. Último. $125,000 al año para mantener a esa mujer encarcelada con su hija. Su hija son otros $125,000. Así que la hija y su mamá son $250,000, pero la mantenemos encarcelada y gastamos $250,000 para encarcelarla porque no tiene $5,000 de fianza. Es que no hay ninguna razón de ser que una mujer, por no tener $5,000, nosotros vamos a gastar $250,000 encarcelándola, cuando el juez le ha dicho, permítale que salga, permítale su libertad si tiene $5,000. Mira, $5,000 es como pedirle $1 millón a esa mujer. Ella no tiene absolutamente nada. Porque si tuviera familiares como ustedes, los reporteros, estoy seguro que si fuera tu prima, tu hermana, tu tía, tú buscarías el dinero y lo saca. El hecho es que no hay quien lo saque de ahí y es inaceptable que continúen bajo estas circunstancias.
I just want to mention one further thing. In the Secretary's statement, he posed two alternatives. Jail, or you go to the bus stop and disappear. The Secretary's a smart guy. He knows those are not the two alternatives. We have the Catholic Church, the Lutheran Church, stepping forward saying, we will take responsibility for these individuals. We'll keep track of them. We will make sure they get to their court hearing. We'll help them locate in a suitable place, not at government expense. So that is a false alternative, and I think really, although we like our Secretary, it was a disservice to pose that as the alternative.
Questions?
And regarding the bond, is there a specific amount that you think these people can afford at all, or not? Because the Secretary in the statement today said that they were trying to reach, an affordable bond for them.
Gentlemen, want to answer? Joaquin? I'm going to let the lawyers, there's two lawyers here.
In terms of the amount, a lot of the amounts that have been said are just beyond their means. As Luis said in Spanish, asking these folks for $8,500, you may as well be asking them for $1 million because they're never going to be able to do it. So we're going to meet at 3:30 and we'll have that discussion with them. We'd also like a lot of these people to be able to be released on their own personal recognizance. So we'll have that discussion also.
And Joaquin, it seems to me, I met 6 women, they were there. They'd all spent, 10, less than 2 weeks. I talked to all of them, they'd spent less than 2 weeks and they're out. And I think there is, and we're going to find out more at 3:30. I really do think there are the ones that are, I think there is a new policy and there are people that are being released. Because I met some of them. And then there are those that are just old, stagnant cases of abuse that are just there, and we have to break that logjam. But look, let's suppose, I'm not saying, I agree with So. It's not like you show up and say, I'm a refugee, and you get, and welcome to the United States. No, somebody's got to check them out physically, see how their health is, interview them, see if they make sure that they're not, we want to make sure that they're not criminals, right? We want to make sure of a lot of things. We want to protect ourselves, we want to protect them. That takes time. It doesn't, what you have to understand is, the woman that I met, right, she could have been out of there 9 months ago. But she doesn't have the money. And I want to make it clear to everybody, if they were a threat to the United States of America, they would never have been offered the bond. And you guys have to understand something. They haven't committed a crime. No crime. Yet every day I pick up the newspaper and I open newspapers and I see people accused of trafficking drugs in this country, of rape, of all kinds of, and they get bonds and they get ankle bracelets and they get monitoring. And yet these women are maintained in that facility. So that's the disconnect that I see between the way we treat them. Pero miren, ojalá que ustedes pudiesen estar ahí. Porque hay que ver las caras de angustia que tienen y hay que ver a los niños. Y le urjo a todos los reporteros que antes de llevar al público piensen como padres, piensen como esposos, piensen como hermanos y piensen que si esto fuera, a mí decir que me rompió el corazón no habla suficientemente de lo que nosotros vimos ayer. Y yo me alegro mucho que yo estaba con Joaquín y me dio apoyo. Y el grupo nosotros, we had to support one another. It was hard. We had to support one another. As colleagues, we had to support one another. At one point, we just said to ourselves, thank you, but we just cut the trip. We said, why? It doesn't matter how much you show us. Oh, we already saw the faces. We already heard the stories. You cannot fix this. So if you told me that it was 14 to 21 days or 14 to 28 days, and the people, when they arrived there, if they knew it's going to take a week for this, it's going to take a week for this, then they say, oh, okay, 30 days. And during that meantime, don't treat them mean. Don't treat them like prisoners. You know, give the kids toys, give the kids candy, give them juice. Welcome them to America. What would you do if one of those children showed up at your house? What would you do? You treat them like a baby and like a child. We should treat them the same way. But this is a for-profit facility, and what they're thinking about is, how much of the government contract do I get to keep in my pocket? Not how is it that I treat with humanity these children. We have to take the profit out of this. And so that's why we should be running. The government should be running these facilities, because then we could go in there. I'm telling you, they humiliate these children. These are not professionals. I walked in there, I thought I was going to a huge shopping center. Remember when we went, there were just hundreds of cars. Why? Because this is a business. And hundreds of people show up every day to run the business of keeping our kids in jail.
I agree with that. I want to get back to the bail issue as well. You know, we met a number of women who had bail anywhere from a couple of $1,000 to $10,000. They don't have it. And so we're going to spend $130,000 a year of taxpayers' money because that woman doesn't have $10,000. Explain to me how that makes sense to the United States taxpayer. That's crazy. Number two, there's been no analysis of what works in the Department of Homeland Security, but the Department of Justice has just completed a report on appearance rate and bond amount. And what they found out on the criminal justice side is that there is no connection whatsoever with the amount of bond and the appearance. If it's $500, you're just as likely to appear as if it's $50,000. So this is essentially an irrational, arbitrary system that is costing the taxpayers money. Finally, in terms of raising these funds, these for-profit companies that we're paying, millions of dollars to, are allowing these women to work, cutting their costs and paying them a dollar a day. So at $1 a day, these women are not going to be able to raise the $1,500. No way. And finally, the churches have been out raising money from donors to do the bond. Well, explain to me, if these are donations, if people in parishes around the country are putting their dollar in the collection basket for the bail, how does that relate to the appearance notion of bond for these poor women that are seeking freedom here? And a final note. One of the lawyers that we met with, who's represented some of these women, expressed this concern. If they can only get out by raising a bond, we are making them vulnerable to human trafficking. Because who is going to pay their bond if it's not the church? It's somebody who may have an interest in exploiting those women. And this lawyer was quite firm that these high bonds really are making these women vulnerable to trafficking cartels. It's something we ought to be worried about.
Thank you all very, very much.
Video and pictures are in a Dropbox PDF.